things that I turn, they've been very successful for me, are if you turn salad bowls, you should turn salad servers. And so ones that I found sell like hotcakes for me are these stainless steel ones that you can buy from any of the outlets there that sell parts. So basically we've got to turn a set of handles. And it would really look better probably if we made them similar. So let's just take a blank and we'll try to make one of these and talk about the basics, because if I do that, that will, if I cover this little gizmo, we'll cover a lot of the basics. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have to use the, I was hoping I wouldn't have to, but I did bring it just in case. Okay, whenever you turn a square, it's always a good idea. I use one of these little $6.95 center finders. Got two of them in the shop. I use them daily for everything, it seems. But when you use one of these, it's not good enough to mark a crosshair here and a crosshair here. Okay, that may be the center, but it may not be. And chances are it probably isn't, mainly because of the thickness of the lead of your pencil. It's going to be off. So every time we mark a center like this, we always do it 4 around, like that. And this piece of stock that I have is just roughed out, but it's nowhere near square. But by doing it all the way around, I end up with a little miniature square or rectangle in the middle there. That's pretty close to the center. Okay, so that's number one when you turn a spindle. Now, when you're turning things like this baluster here, that little detail right there is even more critical, because very typically this bead or whatever this detail is right above where the square part is very, very close in size to the size of the square. So you don't want to be off there. You want to be as close as possible to having that thing right on center. Okay? So that's just another reason why we want to do that. So I'm going to take and just take my scratch off and mark those. Now, what I'm going to use here for this is what's called a STEB, S-T-E-B center. Very handy little center. The original STEB centers were made by Sorby and were quite expensive. But then, you know, companies like Penn State and other companies came along. I guess nothing was copyrighted because all sorts of places started having these. And so instead of a traditional 4-pronged center, these just have all little fine points around the outside, and they hold like crazy. And the most important part is the center is spring-loaded, and that's critically important. So I highly recommend that. Or if you, I do not at all, and I don't know if I have one here. That one doesn't have a center. But anyway, your traditional centers that come with the lathe, the first thing I would do when I get a lathe is take that and throw it away. Because they don't function very well at all. Because they have a fixed point, as you tighten it up, that point is actually like a wedge, and you split a lot of pieces of wood. And so you want one that's got a spring-loaded center. And you can get them now, you know, $19.95 at, you know, as I said, with some of the places like Penn State or some of those other places there. So that's the center, just using a traditional center over here. Okay, so I'm just going to mount that between centers. Now, in the when I first started turning, what we used to do is you would mark this, then you would take a back saw, and you'd actually put the piece of ice, saw a saw curve down in here, and a saw curve in here, because by God, you needed to hold that piece real rugged. We've relaxed a little bit now. You don't have to worry about that. Just the pressure up against here is going to hold that in place for sure. So that's going to stay in the front there. We'll bring this over and tighten up this little rascal. And we're ready to go. Okay. Second thing I guess I should probably talk about is lathe speed. Because the piece of wood is small, almost like a pen blank in this case, a little bit bigger with a square like that, the speed can be definitely increased. I am kind of guilty about saying what speed, because I don't know. I'll know here in a few minutes when I turn this lathe on, because it has a readout, but I have a one-way lathe that does not have a digital readout, so I just put it at whatever I want to, I guess, and let it go. But it's going to be fast. Okay? So I'm going to turn, what faster than that? I'd say probably about 1800 to rough this out. Now the tool that I'm going to be using is a spindle roughing out, made specifically for this project. This is made as a forged tool, made out of a flat piece of steel that's rolled, has a tang on it, has a big sticker when you buy one of them, says not for use with a bowl, because you can snap these little rascals right off. It's made specifically for spindle turning. And what we're going to do is we're going to use right down here in sort of the round part, the gouge part, if you will, when we start taking the corners off. And then the way this thing is made, when we get the corners off and we're getting it down to a round, we'll roll the tool over, and the edge here, for about 3/8 of an inch, is nice and straight. And that's how we'll get that nice clean cut. Okay? So I'm going to rough this down. This is just a tad high. I'm just going to roll it down a little bit. I have to make sure here the lead is snug. Now the other thing that's really nice, really nice, I know I showed people this before, but the spindle turner wouldn't stop the lathe for hours, because with the spring-loaded center, all we have to do is loosen this up, and we can take this off, put the next piece on. So because of that spring-loaded center, that's a major plus. Like when I do these, I'm usually doing 10 or a dozen of these at a time. So you just stack them right here, and you can just rough these down whenever you are ready. Now I'm just going to quickly run through the process of making one of these. Yeah, I'm good here. I got plenty of time. So I actually can go ahead and show you how I would make one of these. I'm going to take these out now. I need to drill a hole in the end to accept the tang of the hardware there. So I'm going to put a spindle adapter on here so we can adapt this 1¼ inch to the 1'8" chuck. And my next move is going to be to drill that hole. I'm going to drill a 7mm hole, and I'm going to drill it 1.5 inches deep, only because that's what the directions say. Otherwise, I don't care how deep you go, right? Okay. So we're all ready to go here. This is one of those situations where you test your lathe to You see, this lathe has a little bit of a problem. The centers don't exactly line up, so we'll see how this goes. But this is how I would go about drilling these out. I'm going to turn the speed down. It's not exactly centered, but that's going to be all right. Drill this inch a half deep hole. Good. Now we're at the point where we can do some spindle turning. Like I said, nice little project here. I'm going to go back to moving this thing between centers. Okay. Now I'm going to switch this up a little bit. For those of you who have, I don't know if this tailstock center was made by One Way or whatever, but if you have this type of a, I don't know about that. There was a cone, I don't know, oh, right here. If you have this type of a tailstock center, they make a cone that threads right on here, and now you've got a point center, and that's good. I didn't know if we would have one of those tonight, so I have a live center that's just a cone, and that cone is going to go right in the hole that I drilled. Okay. So now we're back. The only thing we did in that whole process was okay. Now let's talk about doing or coming up with what we call a story stick. We've got to make a bunch of these things all to have everything at the same point. We mark high points and low points. Now in a little project like this, basically to make a bunch of these to be duplicated, what we're going to do is we're going to find where's the high point on this arc right here. It happens to be right about right there. So that's my high point. This is my low point. So what I've done here is I've made myself a little story stick, as I said, where I marked the high point and the end point, and then my high point, my low point, take the corner of a file, just cut a little groove in there, so that when you go to mark this, your pencil just lays right in there, it'll automatically line right up, and your sides will come out the same. Now, before we go much further though, what we need to do is we need to form a little tenon on the end, because there's a little escutcheon, I guess you would call it, that's going to go on over the end right here. So we need to form a little tenon on the end here that's going to fit right over. Now, let's talk about what tools we're going to use to size the various components of any spindle turning. Traditionally, we've used, or a lot of people have used, spring calipers. I'll almost guarantee you that if you set this for 3/4 with a ruler, set the distance between your points at 3/4, and you turn that tenon, it'll be oversized. Guaranteed. Because there's enough spring in these to make that a little bit too big. It'll actually go right over it while it's still spinning, and the size will be too big. It's very, very difficult to get an exact size. That said, if I had a baluster like this, I would feel totally comfortable using these to determine my sizes. Because of the same reason that that chair stretcher was. It's not critical. It's probably going to be just a touch bigger, but that's okay. It's not going to be a major problem. Now, with this top though, this baluster went into a 3/4 inch hole bored in the bottom of the handrail. That is super critical. We've got to get that baby right on the money. So we're going to use a little different measuring tool. We'll use a set of calipers like this. We'll set this to, in this case, for this tenon right here, I'm going to set these things for 3/4 inch, and I'm going to just snug this right up. Now, this will be used in the back of the lathe. Anytime you've got any type of calipers, you never put your fingers where they might get caught. There's a nifty little hole right in here. Don't want your finger in there. You want to hold this thing because it's apt to catch on a knot, whatever, you never know. So you always hold them as if they can be ripped out of your hand, not going to hurt anything. Now, if you go out, then these are not super expensive. I mean, they may be $25 or something for calipers like this. The first thing you want to do though, because they come with super sharp points right here on the end, the very first thing before you touch any wood with those, you're going to take a file and file a radius right on the end of these jaws here. Otherwise, just touch that thing the first time and away she's going to go. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to use just a standard potting tool. And I just know from past experience that this, the length of that tenon or whatever you want to call it, is going to be just the width of my potting tool, my chance. So that's going to help me out here. So I'm just going to put that on there, line it up with the end. We'll go right in there. And then lay those calipers right in there. That's going to fit perfect. Put a little chamfer on the end, because when you take a look at this, there's a radius on this here. So let's just see how we did. Not a bad idea to check it. But that should fit on there very, very nicely. Snaps right on there, perfect. Okay? Now if I can just get the damn thing off. Okay. I'm just going to use my, there she goes. I like them to fit like that, because when you put the epoxy on there, we're good. But I didn't want to, I probably might loosen that up just a little bit.
Does it hurt when that all goes in your finger?
Maybe we could use I don't know. It's about the same feeling as when I wrapped my head tonight on the stupid guard to this lathe. I was trying to take the guard off because with the guard on this lathe, that's right in here, I couldn't get the tailstock all the way up. So I took the guard off. So I'm trying to get that guard off of there, and there's a little snug there. So I reached over like this. As I cranked it back this way, caught the corner of it right there. So. Yeah.
You got quite the goose egg there now.
It'll go down a while.
Good thing it's once a month meeting.
Okay, I just relieved that just a little bit because it doesn't really have to be that top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my story stick, I'm going to set it on here, and I've got a mark at the high point and at the end. Now, I also mark on here, I didn't have to, but I did, that the size at the midpoint here is 7/8. So there again, I'm going to use these for that diameter. So I'm going to start here. Just go in until that just touches there. And then I'll use the other calipers because I know that that is just under a 1/2 inch. Okay, now, here's another thing. And this is going to come into play when we get to the baluster also. This is what we want to make. They're going to be a pair, so we got to have them the same length. So when we go to cut this with the parting tool down to size, where do we want the parting cut to be? And the way that I do it, the parting cut will be such that the line will be right where the high point of this end is right here. In other words, I don't go back onto here because this has got a little taper to it. It would be oversized. So I want to cut to the back side there, okay? That's really important. That's going to come into play a couple of times on that baluster there. Take that down, and what I was going to do, what I do with the black part, I'm going to set these for, oh I did already, 1/2 inch. Perfect. So now it's just a matter of connecting the dots. Now this notion of connecting the dots is really what we're going to use. You notice I've got some blue tape on the baluster here. Well, the only reason I've got the blue tape, I didn't want to put the pencil lines on somebody else's painted baluster sample here, which is Bob King's. So I put tape on here, and then I've got my marks on here, because doing a taper or any type of a curve like that, my measurement that I use is 3 inches. So when I have to do a long taper like this, I mark it every 3 inches and then use the calipers to designate the size, basically collect the points. So now we'll just bring this right down. Now what I don't want to do, and I don't know if you can see it right here, I don't want to go fully down there. That's my end length. So I'm going to leave that there, and now I can just bring this into the final form. Now remember, when you're doing a spindle, you're always going to cut downhill. But then the other thing is, you only have to cut downhill on the finished pass. So when I'm removing all of that stock from in here, I can go either way. But I just want to, when I'm doing my final cuts, particularly with this wood here, this is a piece of quite curly maple. And so I want to make sure that I'm totally going with the grain. So from my high point here, my finish passes will go this way and then this way, so that I'm always going with the grain. That's going to go right in there like that. Now, from here to here, I've got to shape that to, there's no right and wrong to where you shape them, but it just has to match others. And this being a handle to like a salad set, right now this is somewhat like the shape, but I just know from experience that where I tend to make them too big is right in here. So I need to concentrate on bringing this down. So this size comes right in there better. I can just see where my mark was from my parting tool, and I want to make sure that that disappears. So I want to cut just below that. Now, here at the end is what I was talking about before. I've got that, I'll highlight it just so you can see it here. But that's the end, and that's going to be the high point of my handle here. Again, so that they're all going to be the same. So we'll just cut that right down from that line, right down. We'll take that down to about 1/8 of an inch or so. And believe it or not, we're about done. So that would get sanded up. And rule number one when you demo, don't spend a whole bunch of time sanding so you fill the place full of sawdust. Okay? So there's a handle, and hopefully it's ready for finish. Now I put friction polish on these, so I would put a sanding sealer, diluted shellac on here, let that dry, and by the time I get the rest of them, the half a dozen or so that I'm doing, done, this one will be ready to be put back on the lathe, sanded, and the friction polish would be put on it. Now, then I have this end. So to finish the end, basically what I do is I put this little attachment that I made in the chuck. The end of my piece goes in here, and then I turn that right off, and then this is all finished now. Then I throw a little bit of finish on the end here. So it's all finished on the lathe with that friction polish, and looks something like that when it's done. Okay? Okay, so we crawled. Now let's get into walking and running here. Let's get the full-size baluster on here and see if we can make some chips. Any questions while I'm doodling around here?
When you were making that last cut there, you turned over on that bevel, or you turned over just on the tip of that blade scraper?
To make the end cut here?
No, when you're coming down, so you're getting to like your last two cuts there. I know she was going back and forth.
Back and forth, and then that last cut is with the gouge turned on its side so that I'm using the flat part right here, going right down the bevel this way. Now, it doesn't matter, people have asked, and I thought maybe the question was, does the gouge have to be this way or this way?
That was one of my questions. You were going both directions.
Yeah, doesn't make a big difference.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes no difference whatsoever. Yeah. The one difference between a spindle turner and a bowl turner is that you'll notice, particularly when I get turning beads and things like that, the spindle turner is constantly turning the tool. I mean, it's constant movement. Whereas the bowl turner sets up about where it's going to go, and it's like the tool itself is moving, but I mean, it's not going all around. And the spindle turners, tools definitely are. Okay, so real quick, like, I didn't do any prep work because I said, the hell with it. You'll have to watch. I use in my shop, I do not like a number 2 pencil, at least a 2.5. They used to buy them specifically for me here at the shop. I don't know if they do it in different secretaries. So.
Charlie,
Yeah.
have you ever tried using open-end wrenches for calipers?
Yes. And if you have a 1/2 inch nut and you have a 1/2 inch wrench, the damn thing won't go on there. So they're always quite oversized.
But they're nice on a piece like that if you're just trying to get
They are,
any
they're roughing it
specific
down.
size.
Yes, you are. The only other problem that I have is the ones that the wrenches, the open-end wrenches that I use for sizing, the wrench is way too wide, so I had to grind them down. And I've got a 1/2 inch, 3/4, but I had to take them on the grinder and get them down so I could use them with the parting tool. They're wider than the parting tool. But yeah, you're right, that works. That's a gizmo gadget for the next meeting,
There you go.
right there. I came up with this tool for sizing these spindles. Oh. I'm going to use the regular cup center for this. Okay, I'm going to put this puppy right in centers here. And this is the same thing. I mean, when you're turning these in terms of using the center, we can keep going on this back and forth and back and forth. In terms of taking it off, because it's got the spring-loaded center. Okay, so here we go. We've got the baluster blank ready to go, longer than the baluster that we need. One caution, just put in the back of your brain if you're ever asked to turn a baluster like that. If somebody brings a baluster to you and they say, could you make me one of these, one broke? And I was able to get this one out. There's only a 50-50 chance that's going to be the right size. Because if you think about going down a staircase, the one on each tread, there's usually 2 balusters. The front one is a lot shorter than the back one. I'm speaking from experience. Having made a Jim Dandy baluster, and they come back and say, it's about 6 inches too short. I said, well, it's just exactly like the one you gave me. So now I ask the question. Okay, so we're ready to go. Now, this cut right here is called a pummel cut. It's where we go from square to round. And it's the first time where we want to make sure we've got this about right. So I'm just going to put a mark right there as to where I want that pummel cut to actually be. Now I went ahead and made myself a story stick right here that I can, I made it the same length here. So I'm going to mark 2 marks on my piece here. One is going to be where I want the bottom of that pummel cut to actually be. The other mark to that side of it is going to be how much of a curve is the pummel cut. And we've got to make them all the same. This one is 1/8 of an inch. There's 1/8 of an inch difference between the bottom right here and the point out here. And so we've got those 2 marks on there. Now I'm not going to take the time to go get a square, so I'm just going to mark that on here. Okay. So those are my pummel cut marks. Now the first step in the process is going to be to get this thing down to a round. Again, we're going to use the spindle roughing guide. We're going to get the speed kind of cranked up there. I was going to guess about 1500. I think I'm about right. You can already, I think, hear the vibration in here. This is just about long enough. That was one of my criteria when I wanted to get one of these. I wanted to make sure that I had one that was going to vibrate, because we're going to use a steady to actually smooth this thing down. So having heard that, basically what I would typically do at this point is find the center here. This is approximately 16 inches. So that's about the center of my turning. So I want to make sure that which is my center right there, and it's right here, good position to put the steady rest right here. I want to make sure that I get this section right here good and round right away. Okay? So, I'm not worried about over here, I'm not worried about over here. My main so just a little bit. Now notice I'm using my hands as a steady rest to dampen that down. You can do a tremendous amount of turning with spindle just using your hand as your steady. Now that I've got that smooth and it's running nice and true, I can go back and get this whole thing down to round. But I just wanted to make sure that that was round before I go taking too much stock off here and lightening, if you will, the whole turn. Just going to get that down to the round. Letting my hand ride right over that top just to dampen that noise. And as I said, this is really critical because very typically those first couple of details on most balusters are about the same size as the square. So we want to get those right down nicely. Okay, now I'm going to do the pummel cut now. I don't know if you can see or not, but can you see those two lines right there that are turning? I've got my mark. The first mark here is the top point. Second is the bottom of that. And there it is. 3 spindle gouge you can use, a 3/8, ½ inch, or whatever. I do a tremendous amount of turning. This is like my go-to tool, the 3/8 spindle gouge. Now, what I'm going to do is lay it right on its side and just bring it right in like that, cutting downhill. People worry about getting some tear up. If you do it that way, you'll never, ever, ever get any tear up. That'll be just as crisp. You can bring that right to a point. Where you get tear up is if you bring the tool back. That's definitely a no-no. But we can bring that right in there. And I don't try to do it all at one time. Actually, what I try to do is to kind of figure out what that distance is between the two so that I can get that angle just about right. And now I'm at the top right there. Going to go right down to the bottom. Now I missed it by just a tad, so I went back and just touched it.
Sorry.
And I can still go just about a 30-second more. Yeah.
The camera isn't quite over your shoulder, so it can't really see. Can't see what's happening.
What if we
in
don't?
the
Let's do
intersection
that.
of the two.
I think you should cover it up.
Yeah, so you can either bring the camera up or put it behind you. Whatever's
Okay.
what
Can
works
we bring it
better.
up?
Yeah.
Okay. That'd be good.
That way we know exactly what you're saying of like where that tool
Sounds
makes
good.
contact with the wood. And,
I agree.
and
I think that'd be good. Yeah.
We could probably.
Cut. That's down. There we go.
Wire some quick pocket there too.
Okay. Good deal. Oh, look at that. Up close and personal, then off all the other. Yeah.
I would bring it over to the left a little more. How's that? Yeah.
Oh, I guess you really can't see the lines that I've got on there. I've got these two lines right here. The first line is the points, and you can still see the bottom line. So I've got my angle a little bit too much. I've got to bring it in a little bit straighter, okay? So, anyway, we're gonna crank this dude up. I've got to change that angle just a little bit, but I don't want to touch that outside because that's a... How's that? Is that any better to see? Oh, man, I'm putting in for a raise. That's perfect. Really nice. Okay. Now, I'm going to do a couple of the details on here because I don't have to worry about it getting too, vibrating too much, but pretty quick here we'll set the steady up here. And now, basically, I just need to get going on my details. And the first detail is, from the bottom of the pummel cup, there's about a 1/16 of an inch flat right there. And that's going to be turned with a small 1/16 inch parting tool. So that's what needs to be put on here. And that's one of those details that you can't really measure. So you kind of have to just clean that up a little bit, and that's all set. Back to my story stick here. The next thing I'm going to turn is this bead right here. And what you do is, you know, the old timer that taught me spindle turning said, when you're thinking about turning one of these and you're working right here, just forget about all the rest of the baluster. People get so hung up, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do this. Down here, just concentrate on a little portion. Matter of fact, what he said was if you were making 20 of these, do about 6 inches of each one and then move your way down. And that way there, by the time you get to the second or third one, you really don't even have to do much measuring because your eye will tell you where it has to be. Okay? So, for this, I'm going to put my story stick on here, and I have marked all the highs and lows of my baluster, and then these marks here, of course, are where the tape is for my sizing. And if I hadn't thrown my pencil away, that's why I have a dozen pencils with me all the time. So when I look at this, what I'm looking for are flats, or places that I can measure. And in this case, very typically when you have a bead, there's usually a flat right next to it. And that's definitely a good thing. What's very problematic, and it's one of the reasons I grabbed this particular baluster, is that we have details like this, or this one right here, where there isn't a flat there. So we've got to kind of guess where that juncture is actually going to be. So using, and it wouldn't matter, we could do either set of calipers here, but I'm going to use the spring calipers, and I'll show you basically how I do this. But I mark them so that that's just rubbing now. And as I said, if I actually cut this, now the other thing is that when I'm making this cut down, okay, I don't want that line delineates the side of that bead. But if I cut that right on that line, and then I cut the side of the bead to clean it up, I'm not going to have, my bead's going to be too small. So when I make this cut, I'm going to make it just 1/64 of an inch to the side of the beads. I'll bring that right in there. Now, I will guarantee you that that's probably a 1/16 of an inch oversized right now. You can hear it. So, when you're using these spring calipers, I wouldn't have that problem with the other calipers because there's no grip to it. The back end, you have to go until you can't hardly just touch it. Okay? Now, what do we got here? We got that curve after that. To this day, when I turn a bead like that, I always hit the center. I always do. It's just so that it's a reference point for me. And I'm going to turn the bead, 3/8 spindle gouge, starting with it flat on the top, and then rolling it. And this is just like in a bowl, you don't want to turn it all the way to the top. So I've got to make this bead here. I don't want to start at that top line right there. Out at the corner where all the stock has to be taken off, we're going to I make the bead typically in 3 or 4 passes because I'm practicing the curve. All these beads are different sizes, so you kind of get in the mode of getting a curve in there and just you roll that tool right around. That whole notion about bevel rubbing and everything came from spindle turning. It's not really a bowl turning thing. Now I'm going to go back in. I didn't make that 16th inch. As I said, I can't measure it. So I'm going to go in just a little teeny bit more, and we've got that bead done. Now, if you notice, the line is still there. It's got to be. You size the bead with your parting tool to be the size of that bead. So it would stand to reason that you want that to be there. So that little mark does 2 things for me. First of all, it tells me where the center of the bead is, but more importantly than that, it's a sizing tool. I don't want to take that off until I get the sandpaper, which I will do. I gotta touch up that pumping. I noticed I flustered a little bit with that pummel cut. Yeah, it's pretty close. Sandpaper. Okay, now let's a lot of this is going to be repetition, but let's set up the spindle steady next. Okay. There are a number of spindle steadies on the market, but the one that I really like is the spindle steady made by One Way. And I think it's about 120 or 130 bucks for this thing. I use it all the dadblasted time. This is a 3-wheel steady. Before this came out, there were all sorts of wooden V-blocks and stuff that I used to try to use, and they all just kind of burn the wood and do all sorts of things. This thing is the best thing since sliced bread. It really is sweet. And we want to do this before we do too much turning because we want to make sure when we set the spindle steady that this is still running very, very true. In other words, if I kept going here, as I get this down, particularly this goes into kind of a small cove area here, then it's going to not have the strength. So we'll set this up here. Now, I'm only going to be able to turn these features, then I'm going to have to take this apart and set my tool rest over here. On my lathe, I have 2 tool rest and tool rest bases. One here and one would be over here so that I don't have to change the setup. It's not the end of the world to have to change the setup, but it's just one more thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're just simply going to clamp this together so that the 3 wheels are touching. kind of snug that up. And basically, that's all there is to it, okay? One way has been messing around with these wheels. These are the old style wheel, and I like them better than the new ones. If you were to buy this spindle steady right now, it would be a hard nylon or whatever wheel with 2 grooves in it, and then they put O-rings, 2 O-rings on each wheel. I found the O-rings mark the wood like crazy. I like these wheels. Pretty good. I'll just snug that up there. I didn't get it centered. 2 wheels are turning. This 3rd one isn't. So evidently that needs to go back, and I'm talking just a little teeny bit. But I did notice that one wheel was not turning. Okay, good. Very good. That is really good now. I can turn away forever, and that'll be fine. So, I think we're ready to get some more details done here. So using my rusty trusty little marking stick here, I've got my bead marked on there. I seem to have a
Behind you.
pencil. I usually have a hat on at my shop, and my pencil is no questions asked, right there. You know? So I've got it right there. So we've got this. What I'm marking now is this point right here. Now that identifies that point, and I've got to make a decision on how to treat that. In other words, how am I going to actually mark that? And it really wouldn't matter which way I went. In other words, what I'm saying is, when I go in with my parting tool, I could go in on this side over here, because I would be in the cove, or there's plenty of room, I could go on the outside that way. And I think that's basically how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to go on that side. That way there I can work on the cove and work up to that. So again, I'm going to set my calipers to the size of that point, and away we go. That's the point. Now, basically I've got the flat to the side of the bead, then I've got a cove which is going to come up to the beginning of that cut that I just made. And so I guess we're at a point where we can say the key to duplicating this spindle is going slow, and then I call it doing point-to-point turning. I establish high points, low points, or feature points, and then just connect the wood between them. So, like for example, right now, I know that this is all going to come out of here. This side of that parting cut is the point on my spindle here. When you make a cove cut, right now I'm making this cove right here. The cove is made in 2 passes. One goes from high point here down to the middle, then I need to come out of there, start over here, and come down to it. It's always going to be done. If I come up out of there, I'm going to get a lot of torn grain. as my old teacher said, if you get little lines in there, when you're making a coal or a bead or whatever, that's why they invented sandpaper. I don't know if you've heard of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to shoot along here just so you can see where I'm at, and I do have a pencil line on here. That's the top of this major feature right here. So I'm going to kind of delineate that. What you're going to find is that a lot of this turning, collecting the points, it's like the details of this code. You just kind of fill in the points. I mean, there's nothing measuring. You could measure this and measure this one. Sometimes you might want to, but very typically you won't need to. It really is not super important. That's the high point. I'm going to mark that because that's a size point. Using basically what you would call a push cut, where I've got the tool and I'm actually pushing it, but I am going with the grain. I'm going down into here. Now right here, this is that point, so I've got to come back here. Right in here a little bit. And we're just going to come right in there until that meets. And, you know, we're trying to achieve this little bit right here. So it's just a matter of connecting the points here as we go along. Now I've got let's take just a little bit more off of that. So that this is just a little bit bigger. And for all you bolt turners out there, basically you have no end grain to deal with. You have end grain here, but you're cutting end grain with a slicing motion all the time. Like we've got end grain on the side of this bead, on the side of this little point right here, but you don't even see it because you're cutting it in such a slicing motion. So next here in our moving right along, I think what I'm going to do, just to save us some time, this is going to be my low point, and I'm just going to check this with my story stick here, these marks that I put on here. Hey, right on the money. Bead, 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 point. Okay. Now I'm going to, I think what I'm going to do now, I've got to shape this little vase shape right here. First though, I've marked my low point. I'm going to take and mark the two flats on either side of this bead that happens to be right here. Good. We can do this. Except I didn't make the marks long enough. They disappear when I turn the lathe on. Okay. So that's my bead right there. Leaving just a little bit of that line. I'm going to go right in here and form those two. I'm going to get the small diameter in the vase shape. amount of stock that we're going to take off. I'm going to switch to a half-inch single gouge. There will be very, very little sanding required here. A lot of this is looking at the curves, looking at what you have on your original here, and just making sure that those curves sort of line up. I mean, we've done a lot with the size of them. Okay. Got a hump right there. Kind of using, I guess, what I would call a shearing cut with the side of the gouge. Hey, pretty good. I'm going to get just a little bit off right in here. Okay. Now, of course, we've got to size that bead. So my plan here. Oop, put my pencil line on. Now I just noticed that my little square right here is a little bit too flat, so I need to just go in there, a little bit too wide, I should say. So I'm just going to go in there. It's only about 1/16 of an inch on my original, so I'll go in and clean that a little bit. Okay, now, kind of running out of time here. Any questions about the process? And actually, the rest of the baluster is very, very similar. Actually, it's easy because I've got only to make my, about every 3 inches, I'll make a parting cut here, and then connect the points with that. Now, like I said, the only other thing is up here at the end. I know just because, by looking at this, this goes in as I said, a 3/4 inch hole. So I'll make sure and do from here up, that'll all be done with the other digital calipers that I have. Okay?
Now, do you put a slight taper on the very top then?
Typically-
That goes into the handrail?
Only down in here, but this will be perfectly straight.
Okay.
So it goes into that hole, because you never know where they're gonna cut it off. And I wouldn't wanna taper it, because then if they happen to be making it shorter, I wanna make sure it goes up in there. And I've been yelled at enough from the guys at Kimberly Company, I'm real good at it now. Keep it the right size. And, but that's it.
Good.
We ended by 9. That's a good thing.